mein Esel! All right, everyone. Hello and welcome to episode 37 of the Screenplay Archaeology podcast. I'm your host, KiramidHead, and I would like to start by doing a little house cleaning and explaining that usually in April, anyone who's been listening to this for the last couple years knows, I make it an anniversary episode, and it's like something big and special because not only did this podcast start in April, but it was also the month of my birthday, and I swear I didn't plan that at the time. That's just how it worked out. And I announced over Twitter and Facebook that it was going to be the Alien 3 episode for this month, and it is 3/4 done. I'm just having a little bit of trouble scheduling-wise getting my guy for the first part of it ready for it. So I decided to bump that till next month and do this quick little solo episode in the meantime. My apologies for that. It could not be avoided. And before I get into the subject of this episode, I also want to do a couple of plugs and some social media stuff. I wanted to plug the Shelved podcast. That's a podcast that covers the exact same material that I do, only the guy who does that, Jeremy, does it in a bit of a different format. And he's a little bit more technically skilled at this stuff than I am. I'm still a little rough around the edges just because of, the nature of my recording setup, but that's a good show. Definitely go check that out. And as always, the links are going to be down below for my Facebook page, the Twitter page, the Tumblr page, and the blogger that I'm using for this. So check those out if you feel the need to, if you want to follow, get the latest news on the show. However latest news works with me. It's not exactly a regular thing that I do or anything. But yeah, getting that out of the way, today's episode is going to be Castle Wolfenstein. It's a script written by Roger Avary, the guy who was a friend, and I believe he was a one-time roommate of Quentin Tarantino, and they worked on some stuff together. He contributed one of the stories for Pulp Fiction, and True Romance and Natural Born Killers started as kind of a collaboration between the two, and they got split into two different scripts and got developed further, and so they became different. And more relevant to this script is the Silent Hill movie, which Avary wrote the script for. Now, the things people tend not to like about that movie seem to mainly have come from Christoph Gans, the director who came up with the story. And Avary just kind of molded them into a screenplay of sorts. And he did a fairly good job with that. That film has its problems, but Castle Wolfenstein, the script is based on the Wolfenstein game series, and it's about, the storyline of the script is it's following B.J. Blazkowicz, who is a U.S. soldier whom, when he was 13 in 1933, he lived in the town of Wolfhaven in Germany below the Castle Wolfenstein. And he gets out, but his father gets captured, and he's told his father was killed in one of the concentration camps. And so he comes back on the eve of D-Day to help with the invasion and kick some Nazi ass because he helped escape to his family in America. And at the last minute, he gets pulled by the Office of Secret Actions, I believe it's called. And he gets put on this mission where they're going to infiltrate Castle Wolfenstein, which has now become like the SS Center for Special Operations. It's a lot of the jargon in this I'm going to screw up because I'm not overly familiar with the jargon, and he's picked because of his familiarity with the area from his childhood and stuff like that. And so that's the storyline of this script, and as far as background goes, I don't have a whole lot here because, I don't know Wolfenstein terribly well. I'm aware of the overall premise of the series being that it's basically a first-person shooter where you fight Nazis and Nazi super science, although it did start as a point-and-click stealth game in the 80s. I've not played those two. In fact, the only one I've played is Wolfenstein 3D because it was the id Software game, the one that was a lot like Doom, and I love Doom, so I decided to try this game out. And the game's actually really fun. I like Doom a little bit more because even though it's the same basic play style, and I think it's like I think they like developed the engine further for Doom. It plays very similarly. I think Doom just plays a little bit better, and it plays more smoothly because I die a lot more in Wolfenstein than I do in Doom, and that's because the controls are a little jankier and it's a little harder to move around in that game. I find like it's not as smooth or as well developed as Doom was, but for an earlier iteration of that kind of game, I think it actually works pretty well. And I did download Return to Castle Wolfenstein, which, according to the title page, that's what this game script is based on. But I went to open it up after I finished Wolfenstein 3D, and it wouldn't open on my laptop. Steam basically just went, fuck you, this thing's not opening, and I've never been able to get it to work in the entire time I've had it. Thankfully, it was a cheap game, like $5 or something on Steam. It was pretty cheap, and I've not played any of the games that came out since then. I've not played the 2009 game, which came and went with barely a whimper, from what I understand. And I know the new games, New Order, and whatever the New Colossus, I think the new one is called. I know they're very well liked, but I haven't gotten around to them yet. I may eventually. It'll happen somewhere down the line. So yeah, I do like Wolfenstein, and I think the games are pretty fun. Whether a movie would work, it's one of those things where until I read this script, I didn't really have an answer, but having read it, I think it actually works quite well. And this script, if it had gotten produced, it would have probably been one of the better video game movies, and people would say, yeah, that was a pretty fun action movie. Why can't more video game movies be like this? Now, as far as the background for the movie itself goes, from what I've read, Avery sort of signed on to write and direct it initially in 2007, and I'm guessing he got that off the back of the relative success of Silent Hill, because that was a relatively well-received video game movie. Not necessarily by the fans, but people in general seem to kind of like that one. It wasn't a critical success, but it seems to be a film that people more or less enjoy, and I do like that movie in spite of the problems, and I maintain the big mistake they made was adapting the first Silent Hill game, because that's a storyline that's convoluted as hell to begin with. That on top of the changes they made, it wasn't the smartest direction to go in. But my understanding is that was either the distributor, whom I think was Sony, who was either them or Konami. Somebody up high said, no, you have to adapt the first game first. And so they did that, and when they really should have just done two, because that's a standalone story, makes sense without the first game. And it would make for a pretty good movie if they adapted it right, I think. But to move on to this Castle Wolfenstein script, it's dated April 2013, so 5 years ago. Yeah, Avery initially got the job in 2007, but it got delayed for years because he rather notoriously got into a vehicular manslaughter incident where he was driving drunk and he got into a car accident. He killed a number of the other parties involved, and so he went to prison, and that's why I believe he was supposed to write and maybe even direct the second Silent Hill movie. I know he was supposed to write it, and that's why that didn't happen, was because he was in prison. And there was all this talk of, he's going to get out on a work furlough program or something like that, so we can have him write this thing anyways, and that never happened. And I guess Hideta and Don Carmody just went, oh yeah, fuck it, we're just going to get the cheap guy we have to make the second one. So that explains Silent Hill Revelation, even though I do enjoy that movie as kind of a time waster. It's not a good movie, but I can sit through it. But no, to actually move on to this script, like I mentioned before, it's titled Castle Wolfenstein, and it says it's based on id Software's Return to Castle Wolfenstein, even though from what I can tell reading this script, and looking at the plot synopsis on Wikipedia, the only things this really borrows from Return to Castle Wolfenstein are a few character names, and maybe their general overall descriptions and possibly their personality. I can't really speak to it because, like I said, the game would not open on my laptop when I bought it. So yeah, to start from the beginning, it opens with it's at night, and it's showing the moon illuminating Castle Wolfenstein, and it's perched atop a mountain called the Wolfhorn, and they say it's in southern Bavaria, which means it's on the northern fringe of the Alps. And it's overlooking this village called Wolfhaven, Germany, and we go down into the town, and we see that there is a Nazi book burning going on, and it's May 1933. I believe it's May. Yeah, it's May 10th, 1933, and so we meet William Josef Blaskowitz, 13, and his friend Ilse von Bülow. They are watching, and they're not happy. And so they're talking about this, and she tells him that she's been transferred to the new school that's up in the castle that only Germans can attend. And I believe there's something about how, Actually, she brings this up later on, but he doesn't say it here. She brings it up way later on in the script. Oh, you said you'll never leave me, and he doesn't say that here. So, yeah, that's kind of a fuck up. But and so she's kind of resigned to the situation and she walks away. And then his father, Dr. Abel Blazkowicz, he sees him and then brings him back to the apothecary shop that he runs. And while they're there, the doctor, he starts preparing a prescription for Frau Bruninghaus, who's a townswoman. And he's apparently this really good apothecary with really good medicine. An apothecary, for those of you who don't know, is not like a real medical doctor, but kind of like, what you would see in medieval villages who would like prescribe stuff for people, stuff like that. And so it's kind of interesting seeing this in a modern setting, which kind of fits with the whole thing because there's this very, there's kind of a streak of medievalism with the SS and the Nazis. Now, Abel's not a Nazi, obviously, but that's interesting. And so he's giving her like this tincture or something, and he says that he's experimenting with a species of stick insect from India, and they asexually reproduce. And he milks their sexual organs to help make these drugs. And I'm just imagining a guy sitting there masturbating a stick insect, and it's just the weirdest mental image I have had all day. And it's also mentioned that, because things are getting bad in the village Bruninghaus, she mentions, oh, are you going to go back to Poland or visit your sister in America? And Abel says, no, I've made my home here, I'm going to stand by it. And so that explains the name Blazkowicz, which is it's probably not a real name, if I'm guessing. I haven't done the research on this, so I might be wrong. But it sounds very Polish. It doesn't sound, or further Eastern European, but it's not a German. So that's kind of cool. But he is specified as being Polish here. And so while they're talking, a group of Gestapo agents who are led by Oberfuhrer Wilhelm Death's Head Strasse, who he's referred to as Death's Head because he has this thin, pale face, it's like really haggard and drawn in, and it resembles the Death's Head logo that he wears on his uniform. Now, one thing that's strange about this script is that these guys are described as Gestapo, but later on, Death's Head is very clearly stated to be SS, and I did not stop to do the research on this before I started recording, but I'm pretty sure those were different things. So it seems like they kind of mixed up a little bit here. But they drag, Abel off, and they say, oh, you're going to be tried and executed because you're spying for Stalin, you're Polish, and you're spying for the Russians and the communists. And even though at this point, I believe they were still, Hitler and Stalin were allies at this point, and the Nazis never liked the communists. That is very much a fact of history. And they're about to drag off William, BJ as he's later known, and Frau Bruninghaus covers for him, claims that he's her son, she takes him away. And then it cuts to 11 years later. It's June 4th, 1944. We're in England, and it's the eve of D-Day, 2 days before D-Day, and William, who's now been nicknamed BJ, he's a U.S. Army Ranger who is, it's mentioned he's, performed pretty well in training and stuff. Pardon for the burp there. And he gets pulled from his unit just before the invasion by the Office of Secret Actions, and he's talking to the head guys, and he meets the British Agent 1, whom he's just called Agent 1 throughout this thing. We never hear his name. And we learned that, he got out of Germany, made it to his aunt in Mesquite, Texas, and now he's been a highly accomplished Army Ranger. And so the OSA, they recruit him for a mission to Wolfhaven, partly because he knows the area and partly because he speaks fluent German. And I like that idea. I like that. I'm guessing this isn't something that ever comes up in the game because BJ in the game I played, Wolfenstein 3D, he's basically just Doom Guy, in that in fact, his face is literally the same as Doom Guy's, which I think is pretty funny. But he's literally just a guy who was on a secret mission and got captured and locked up in Wolfenstein, which in that game it's just their prison. All the weird science stuff is in the later levels, which are in different places. But I actually kind of like the idea of him being, him having like special knowledge of the area that can help with the mission. I actually kind of like that idea. It actually reminds me of Inglourious Bastards, where Michael Fassbender knows German and he doesn't know it quite well enough, so he gets fucked up. But it reminded me of that a little bit. And then here comes one of the weaker parts of the script, is that it cuts. Oh, by the way, right before he goes and meets with Agent 1, we get this scene of BJ who's being led there by a female officer or something, and he's checking out her ass and trying to ask her out. And I'm like, why are we spending a page on this? But okay, so right after they talk a little bit in the office, it immediately cuts to BJ, Agent 1, and this team that they've assembled together from different allied armies. They're on a plane, and I'm like, I would have liked a little bit more of a mission briefing or something, and, getting to meet some of these guys, because what happens is that they're going to drop is that they're in a bomber and they're going to drop a load of explosives and bombs over a German munitions factory in a place called Kriemhildeberg. Nice reference to the Nibelungenlied there. And after that distraction happens, they're going to parachute out over the forest and move towards Wolfhaven and the castle. And so they come up, but then they come under attack from German planes, Messerschmitts, and they just start shooting up the plane, and many get killed on the plane, or they get shredded by machine gun fire as they jump. The bombs do get dropped. And BJ is like, okay, we're going to stop jumping out of this thing. And he decides he goes against Agent 1's orders, and he jumps into the tail gun, and he starts shooting at the planes. He tells the others, basically gives the others an opening to jump out. And what's interesting here is that some of these people are named, and you have Carmack, Romero, and Hull. And Romero and Hull pretty much die. Hull's a weird case because he kind of sort of comes back later in a way it doesn't make sense. But Carmack is described as being more of a secretary than a soldier, like he belongs behind a desk. And he ends up being one of the few who lasts quite a while in this script. But they all parachute down. And what's weird is that the way it just kind of jumps into this scene, you don't really get introduced to these guys. Now, most of them aren't important. They're just there for references and shout-outs. The only one who's important is Carmack, but you don't even really get an introduction to him in the actual action. It's just a little aside in the script that wouldn't be on screen. So I would have liked the scene of them maybe getting on the plane and, you get to hear their names and stuff like that. That would be nice. And this isn't the greatest example, but what I'm thinking of is like in the Doom movie when the unit gets in the helicopter and then their guns read out their names to them. Yes, that's a terrible example and it is very lazy exposition, but that would help a lot because otherwise it's just a reference that unless they're wearing name tags, you're not going to get what the reference is. It is kind of funny that John Romero gets killed almost immediately here because you can just imagine this movie going, we just made John Romero our bitch, which is, if you know about the Daikatana marketing, you know what that, but no, they don't actually say that in the script, sadly. So it's like, Carmack, Agent 1, Romero, and Hall, they all jump out. And I'm pretty sure Romero and Hull, they just get killed, and Carmack lands in one place, and he runs off and hides in the bombed-out munitions factory. And Agent 1, he lands in the thick of battle, and he gets overcome by these mysterious soldiers who are unaffected by bullets, and they have glowing eyes. And it's weird that these things show up here because they're the super soldiers that you fight against in the games, only here they don't have machine guns mounted in their chests, and they're not complete fucking bastards. I hate those guys because unlike every other enemy in the game, they don't make any noise, so you can't hear them coming, and they can get shots off at you before you even know they're there. They're fucking bastards, and I die to them a lot. But it's weird that they get brought up here because they never really get mentioned or brought up again. They're just kind of here for this one little scene. And then there is another kind of weird Nazi super soldier, at least, well, two kinds, but one kind you get to see like a whole group of, but they seem like very distinctly different things in that scene. And it's just weird to bring these things in just for a bit and not even really explain what they are. It's a strange reference. And also, the plane, BJ manages to shoot it down, but crashes into the bomber, apparently killing BJ. And that's going to lead to some bullshit in a second. And so one gets knocked out, he gets captured, and we wakes up, he's being interrogated by Ilse von Bülow, who is now in full she-wolf of the SS mode, just complete Nazi sexploitation character. She's missing an eye, she has an eye patch, and there's like a scar going down showing that someone tried to cut at her eye. And she tries both sodium pentothal and her sexual wiles to get information out of Agent 1, but neither of these work, and she hands one over to a firing squad and leaves. And one, he's about to be executed when BJ shows up still alive. You kind of glimpses of him running around in the wreckage, and he kills the men in the firing squad with one of their own machine gun nests, which is pretty cool. And then they have a bit of an argument, and like one punches him out and says, always follow my orders. And then BJ punches Agent 1 out and goes, hey, next time a thank you would be nice. And all this time I'm thinking, okay, how did he survive that? How did he survive the plane crashing into the other plane? Did he just jump at the last second? It's not explained. It's actually quite strange. And so BJ and Agent 1, they go through the woods and they arrive at Wolfhaven and they reconnoiter the area and they're watching. And so they see the cable car that goes up to the castle. It's heavily guarded by men and panzer tanks and machine guns. And they notice from a distance that what appears to be Hitler is getting into the cable car and going up to the castle. And then one tells them, hey, that's why the mission is so important, because not only do we get word Hitler was going to be here, but that he's going to be shown something important at the castle, and they need to find out what it is. Now, if you hear that description of a cable car going up to a castle on the mountain over a village, or if you've seen the movie Where Eagles Dare, you recognize that immediately, and that's a great movie to be drawing from for a cool sort of World War II action movie, because that's one of the best movies ever made. It is so good. If you ever get a chance, definitely check out Where Eagles Dare. It's a great little action movie. Well, I say little, it's like 2.5 hours long, but it's so badass. Richard Burton, Clint Eastwood, definitely give it a look. It's got some cool twists in it too. And so they say that, they're going to have to find their contacts with the German resistance called the Kreisau Circle. And as they're heading on their way there, they knock out some drunken SS officers and take their uniforms. It turns out that the meeting place is going to be in a beer hall. And as they're going in there, there's some carousing. There's some drunks, the Nazis singing, like German songs, like the Deutschland über Eis and all that. I can't pronounce it. I'm part German. I can't pronounce most German. I will gladly admit it. They sneak in. They almost get recognized by BJ's old school teacher, who's now part of the SS. And I found this interesting because this is another shout out to us. Pardon me if I'm mispronouncing this, but it's Silas Warner, who created the original Castle Wolfenstein, the point-and-click game I mentioned that I haven't played. And he was apparently someone who wasn't a particularly public figure, like no one really heard much from him, but he did approve of Wolfenstein 3D in the new direction. He apparently didn't mind it from what I've read. It's interesting that he's here because the id Software guys, they get to be, I hesitate to say heroes because most of them die really quickly, but it's just strange that the guy who created Wolfenstein in the first place gets written off as a Nazi. And we even get a little flashback to BJ in school, and the guy's showing this horrible, racist cartoon of a Jewish guy showing all his racial imperfections. And he's like, here, BJ, he's like, here, let's look at young Blazkowicz and see how interbreeding among the Poles has changed their physical appearance. Jesus fuck, what do you have against Warner, Avery? Unless you're just trying to be clever or something. But they're saved by a member of the circle who's Gitte Kessler, who knocks out Warner, and then right as the band hits a drum or something, she shoots him in the head and hides the body, and then she leads them to a secret room in the back, and they meet her brother, Ernst Kessler, who is the head of the Kreisau Circle. At least in that area. And he tells them that Hitler is definitely at the castle, that, their agents spotted him and they said his behavior appeared unusual. And he mentions that there's some rumor that he may have a degenerative disease, but it's all very vague. And he says he has a way to get them into the castle without firing a shot, which is hilarious considering how much carnage there is in this script. But you mentioned that, there's a train full of art that was looted from Paris. That it was all this art that was in the catacomb, that's being stored in the catacombs under the Louvre. Most of it's being taken to Berlin, but there's these very specific German paintings that Heinrich Himmler, the leader of the SS, has ordered to be, he's ordered them to be, redirected to Castle Wolfenstein, and it's this specific artist named Ulrich Leff, and I'm only mentioning this because it gets brought up later on in a very strange way. It's a thread that doesn't really get carried on. It's very weird that they brought it up, but stopping at Wolfhaven, and so what they do is they intercept the truck on the way to the castle, and They try to deal with the two soldiers in the front, but it turns out there's more in the back, and so they have to kill all of them. And so Kessler's driving the truck, and one and BJ are hidden inside the art crates. And Kessler's wearing the uniform, and so he's driving it to the Alpine wheelhouse, as it's called, where the cable car takes off from. And so this all goes off without a hitch, almost. The crates get put on the cable car. Well, they get put in the truck. The truck gets put onto the cable car, and Kessler leaves. Cable car goes up to the castle. The crates get taken down to storage, but then it almost fucks up because the guards in the storage room decide to open up the crates, and they open one up, and they find, instead of the art they were looking for, because these guys decided they just had to take a look at it early, they find a rather lewd picture of a topless woman, and then machine gun fire burst from where the tits on the picture are, and so I'm like, must be a fembot. But no, it's BJ and Agent 1. They managed to kill them all. They even kill this guy who's running for the alarm. And then we see the Carmack, who is hidden inside the bottom storage compartment on the food truck. He's managed to enter the castle, but he's come in through the kitchens. And he hides in a dinner cart that's intended for a character we'll meet later, who is Dr. Otto Giftmacher, who is a character from Wolfenstein 3D. He's one of the bosses in the There's basically three groups of three sets of levels. There's two groups of three sets of levels in that game, and And episodes 4, 5, and 6 are like a prequel to episodes 1, 2, and 3, so kind of like Star Wars in that sense. But like episode 4, you fight Otto Giftmacher as the final villain. Final boss, I should say. And so BJ and 1, they're going through the place, and it's mentioned in between the major scenes most of the time that they are, shooting Nazis as they go along, which is very much in the vein of the game, which is just how I think of the game. You're going from place to place and you're shooting people along the way. But they find a room labeled Übersoldatenprogramme, which BJ translates as Super Soldier Program. So inside they find a vivarium full of the same stick insects seen in the apothecary shop at the beginning, and they see a new kind of tank being constructed, and Agent 1 is just pleased as hell. He's snapping pictures of everything and all that. And this is where I thought they were going to introduce those super soldiers from earlier and explain them that, they've used the those strange properties of the stick insects to give them like healing abilities or make them like semi-invulnerable to bullets, like basically what they were trying to do in Puppet Master 3. But that never really comes up again. In fact, the Übersoldat is something completely different later on. But okay, so that's interesting. And so they're continuing through the castle, and they go up to like what's called this mezzanine area, I think, and then they go up and they're on a balcony overlooking the castle courtyard, and they see the food cart that Carmack was hiding on. They don't know he's there. They think he's dead at this point. And they see it being wheeled across towards Dr. Giftmacher's quarters. And then Carmack, after the people leave, he slips out from the cart. He comes face to face with what appears to be Hitler. And a struggle ensues, and I believe like a shot is heard going off or something like that. But we don't see what happens. And this is actually kind of a clever cliffhanger because it's left hanging. And it comes back and gets resolved eventually. But it happens so long later, so long after this, that if you were watching the movie, you'd almost kind of forget about it a little bit, which I think is kind of cool. But it is actually kind of interesting where that goes. And so, okay, they see Giftmacher leading an agitated-looking Hitler across the courtyard, and he goes through a door just below them. And so they go down the stairs to the mezzanine. It's over a big room with a fireplace, which is also making me think of Where Eagles Dare. And they see Giftmacher, Death's Head, and the script says it's Death's Head, but it's not revealed that he's Death's Head until later on. So it's like, why is it telling us that it's him already? Like, it should just say, like, mysterious SS officer or something like that. That's generally what scripts do. And so they're watching, and they're talking, but they can't hear anything. They're like, oh yeah, Hitler looks pissed, but everybody seems kind of on edge. And then a lieutenant comes in, and they get called away to deal with something serious, and I'm guessing that's because they found the dead people in the storage room. That's my guess. And some of the bodies they left along the way. And so Agent 1 is like, hey, BJ, this is your shot. So BJ goes down the stairs from the mezzanine into the room, sneaks up behind Hitler. I mean, he kills the lieutenant with his knife. He's about to kill Hitler, and he actually says, "Die, Führer, die," I think, which just made me think of the Simpsons joke where he goes, "Oh, that's just German for die, for the, Bart, the." It's basically the same joke as Die Führer. It looks like it says Die, Führer when written out to an English speaker. But then Hitler turns to face him, and then this is weird, because honestly, we're about halfway through the script at this point. We're about an hour in. There's a lot of stuff going on. The script is a lot of fun. Like, it's a pretty good World War II kind of action thriller up to this point. This is where the script gets fucking insane, because it turns around, and it's not Hitler. It's a clone, but they don't use the word clone because they don't know what a clone is. In fact, when Death's Head is talking later on, he basically coins the term clone, or implies that the SS have coined the term clone to describe this thing. But it's an imperfect clone of Hitler who's described as having something akin to Down syndrome. And it says, like, he has close-set eyes, and, like, all these teeth, and, like, a tiny mouth, and a big potato-like head. And in the scene descriptions, I shit you not, they call it retard Hitler. Not retard Hitler, they call it retarded Hitler. And, like, I mean, oh god, they're not taking this seriously at all. But, I mean, I kind of had to chuckle at that. Like, it's just so insane that this just happened. And so 5 soldiers, they burst into the room and fire at BJ, who jumps out of the way, and they kill retarded Hitler in the crossfire. And BJ and 1, they flee the area looking for an exit, and they find a barred up door, and so they open it thinking it might be an exit. And inside, they find a room filled with failed Hitler clones, some with mental development issues like the other one, some are deformed, some have clear severe anger issues, and they're like, well, we came here to kill Hitler. Let's kill Hitler. And so they just shred this room full of a bunch of Hitler clones with machine gun fire. And I'm just like, damn, this just one-upped Inglourious Bastards by like a factor of 1,000,000. And so they decide that because since Hitler isn't actually there and so they can't actually kill him, they figure, okay, this mission is a failure, and they head to the radio room and they request an early extraction, but the command won't do it, and so they have to find a way to keep going for like, I think it's like they say like 9-10 hours or something like that is how long they have left. And it actually provides for a pretty decent ticking clock as this thing is going on, because they occasionally will bring up how much time is left until they have to get to their extraction point, which thankfully is not like an hour away from the castle, because otherwise they would have been fucked when we get to the end. But we'll get there when we get there. But they already have like a ton of Nazis on their tails from earlier, and BJ was like holding them off with a machine gun, not unlike Clint Eastwood holding off the Nazis in Where Eagles Dare, while Richard Burton's getting the message out over the radio. And so they try to escape across the roof, but Agent 1, he slips and he almost falls. He's clinging to the drain pipe. And BJ saves him, and he like swings him onto a balcony which has some bad guys on it, and like knocks them over, so they're fighting. BJ is like trying to get away, and he like tries to climb down the drain pipe, but it breaks and he lands in the snow and knocks himself out. We see Agent 1 gets taken down as well. And so they wake up. Yeah, they wake up in an office later on, and there's Hans Grosse, the SS officer, who later on is revealed to be, he's like the prison warden for Castle Wolfenstein, which is basically what he is in Wolfenstein 3D. He's the boss of the first episode because you're escaping from the prisons in that one. He's the final boss. So that's a pretty decent, it's a pretty decent reference there. And then Death's Head, finally shows himself, and then like BJ's like, oh no, this is the guy who took my father off and gassed him at Dachau. And then BJ recognizes him, and of course, Death's Head doesn't say anything. And Agent 1, they drag him off to Giftmacher for torture, and then Ilsa comes in, and BJ doesn't recognize her yet. And she says, no, don't take him to Giftmacher. I want to try and convert him myself using my methods. And Death's Head is like, oh, whatever, fine. And this is also the scene where Death's Head is talking about how, like, oh, Hitler has this disease and he might be dying, and so we created this cloning program to try and make him live forever. And it's like, well, you're not doing such a good job, are you? And it's like, it has its problems. We'll fix it eventually. God. You get the idea. He is incredibly annoyed by these people, which I think is kind of funny. Okay, so Ilsa knocks him out. She tells her her two subordinates to tie him to the X in her chambers. And I should mention right about now that Death's Head, Strasse, and von Bülow, those were characters from Return to Castle Wolfenstein, but they're very different. Strasse in that game, he was the head of the science division, while Helga von Bülow, as she was called, was the head of the paranormal division, and they were sort of rivals, and this whole history didn't exist there from what I gathered. And apparently, pretty early on in the game, Agent 1 gets captured and dies, and he's one of the things that comes from that game, and that's really about it from what I can tell. Yeah, that doesn't bother me. This seems more to be, even though it says it's based on Return to Castle Wolfenstein, it's more of like let's take the general concept of Wolfenstein and things from across the series, because there's not really an ongoing storyline at this point, and let's just make a Wolfenstein movie. And so, okay, in Giftmacher's lab, Agent 1 gets dumped in this cylindrical chamber, and Giftmacher is talking, he's saying, like, which he can't, well, by the way, which one can't really climb out of, because, like, the walls are too slick or something like that. And he says, oh, I'm going to do an experiment with the mob mentality and see how long you can survive. And he dumps a rat king, which this is apparently a real thing that happens, where rats, they can become encrusted in filth and all sorts of things, and their tails will get stuck together and they become like a big squirming mass, which just seems positively Lovecraft. And this one is especially big because it says it's 300 to 500 of these things, all clumped together by the tail, to see how long he will last. And so we cut away from that. And then we cut back to BJ, who's in Ilsa's quarters. He's tied to a wooden X. She reveals herself to him and says something along the lines of like, oh, you once promised you would never leave me, blah, blah, blah. And then once you were gone, I kind of had to survive on my own. And that's why she became what she is. It's a decent enough idea, but I don't really get. But I mean, like I said earlier, that line never actually occurs at the beginning. Like it would mean a lot more to the audience if they had mentioned that earlier, if their conversation didn't end the way it did. And I think it's an interesting idea for a character that she she went as far as she did because just out of pure survival instinct. And she is still very much a bad guy in this script. Don't misinterpret what I'm saying. But it adds a little bit of depth to her, humanizes her just a little bit, which I thought was a nice idea. And the way her character ends in the script, I'll get to that later, but it's a nice little moment. But like she like attempts to seduce him over to her side, and she even unties one of his hands, and BJ just flat out punches her and knocks her out. Unlooses his other bonds, and he opens the door and will be captured by a Death's Head, and he's like, I knew this wouldn't work, and he just drags BJ off. And so BJ wakes up in the cell, and he finds that in the cell next door to him is Kessler. He says that they were caught trying to smuggle the paintings out, and that Gitta was killed resisting. And you actually see a brief little flashback to Gitta just being shot in the head, which is pretty brutal. And he mentions, she took 5 of them down with her, and I'm like, okay, that's awesome. And so BJ tries to figure a way out of his cell, and he finds this relatively recently bricked up opening, and so he's thinking he's going to find a passageway, and maybe he can get into the other cell and help Kessler get out. But it turns out it's an alcove that's called a forget-me-not, where prisoners would be bricked up and left to die, and there's this chained up mummified corpse there. Well, there's a mummified corpse inside. I can't recall if it's chained up, but in the cells, in the games in Wolfenstein 3D, there will be little alcoves, and some of them will have skeletons in them, or bones or stuff in it. So that's a pretty cool reference. And so Kessler's freaking out, and then Giftmacher and Grosse, they arrive, and they take Kessler away, and BJ is thinking, and he looks at the corpse in the alcove, and he gets an idea. So we come to Giftmacher's lab, and he has Kessler strapped to a table, and he's talking to him about how one of the paintings has been brought to him. He talks about how Left's paintings, he applied the oils really thickly, and so if you scratch the surface, there's still oils underneath, and so he takes a sample of them. He says, you can make this into a very potent nerve gas. And it's really strange that he brings that up, because I don't really understand, why because the paintings, if they were not brought up again at this point, just say it was part of Himmler's obsession with the Germanic history and mythology and stuff like that, that would make sense. But it gets brought up again for a scientific purpose, and then that's the last time we see it. We see a chemical lab later, but it never... And there is a big super weapon at the end, which I'll get to, but it is definitely not a gas. But it's strange. Then he started talking about, he was experimenting on people with electricity, and it kept killing them, and he says he wants to try it on a thinner person because maybe the less body fat will allow for a better charge or something, or a better conduction. It's really strange, and it doesn't really make sense with what he does later, and so he begins to saw the top of his skull off, like Hannibal style. Or at least that's what it sounds like until we see what happens later. But okay, so Grosse, he's gonna go to get BJ so they can experiment on him, and he sees BJ in the cell, curled up in the fetal position, and so he goes in, and he's trying to taunt him to get a reaction from him. He gets pissed off, so he goes in, but he finds it's a mummified corpse wearing BJ's clothes, and BJ bursts out from the alcove. It turns out he had piled up the bricks in front of it to make it look like it was still bricked up, and he's in his underwear, and they start fighting. And this is really badass, because this is how it's described in the script. I gotta read this out in full detail. He grapples with Hans, who, rather than fearing the ambush, is grinning with excitement. BJ slammed him against the wall, and without wasting any time describing the various action of this scene, try to imagine a WWE wrestling match in a small cell. Groins are kicked, faces smashed into walls, heads are pile-drived. It's all out the fight scene to end all fight scenes. The ambition should be to outdo John Carpenter's They Live. A tall order indeed. Holy shit. This script is pretty cool and has some pretty great action throughout it. The fact that it has bald-faced audacity to name-drop They Live, that amazing fight scene, and not only name-drop it as a comparison to the fight scene they're doing, but to say that they're going to intend to outdo it, is completely insane, and I kind of admire the audacity there. And so here's how it ends, is that they're fighting, and then BJ grabs the knife that's that Grosse has tucked into his boot, and he stabs blindly, and he stabs it up his ass, and it goes up to the hilt and starts cutting his insides. And here's where it gets really great. Here's something that's kind of funny, is that he drops to the floor and goes, "Hey, mein Esel!" Which reminds me of how when you kill the Germans in the game, they just will randomly shout "Mein Lieben" or something like that. Or the Gestapo guys go "Gestapo," like they're like a goose. I don't think that's how it's pronounced, but that's pretty badass. So he's trying to get some, he's trying to scramble away and get the knife out of his ass, and then BJ kicks him off his feet, and so he lands on his ass, and the knife goes even further, and the knife just completely cuts up his insides, and it just kills him. Like, he fucking starts bleeding out the mouth too. I'm like, that is the most insane thing I have seen in the script in quite a while, and in a good way, not in a bad way like some of the scripts I've read. That was very much a badass scene. And so, Hans is now taken care of, and so BJ, gets the clothes off the corpse and then goes off into the castle. He has Gross's key rings, and he also has a gun now. Seriously, if that fight scene got filmed, it would be amazing. Now, I've never seen Roger Avary film a fight scene. In fact, I've not seen the stuff he's directed. It would be interesting if he had ended up directing Beowulf like he intended to. Maybe I would have an idea of what his fight scenes would look like, but that never happened. So we got the Zemeckis version, which I don't mind, but I would have preferred to see how Avary would have directed it. So okay, this is where it gets really weird. Is that BJ's wandering around the castle, and he finds his way to Giftmacher's lab, and there's an outer room. There's an outer room to the lab. There's all these scientists who are experimenting on Hull, who was one of the soldiers from the team at the beginning, with this electrical machine. I guess they're trying to, reanimate him or something. It's not really clear if he was alive while he was experimented on, so maybe he survived the attack at the beginning. Like I said, I'm not sure. But no, BJ kills all the scientists, and he continues deeper into the lab. And here's where it gets really crazy. He finds Giftmacher, who's listening to Wagner, and he's scooping out Kessler's brains through a hole in the crown of his head with an ice cream scoop. And he's putting them in a dog bowl, and I'm pretty sure he is actually feeding them to a dog. Let me check the script real quick here. Yeah, there's a big German Shepherd who eats them, and then the German Shepherd just kind of disappears. What he's doing is he's taking out Kessler's brains, and he picks up this thing which is described as looking like a miniature sea mine. It's like a metal ball with studs all over it. And he goes to try and push it through the hole, but it gets stuck. He's going, Scheisse! And just starts pounding it in with a rubber mallet to get it into his head. And an antenna extends from the top of the guy's head. And BJ's like, okay, what the fuck are you doing? And so he pulls out, and so Giftmacher pulls out a remote control, this massive shoebox-sized remote control, which is described as looking like a retro 40s version of a PlayStation 2 controller, and it's attached to this radio transmitter, and he starts using it, and Kessler gets up, and he's a remote-controlled automaton now, basically, and starts fighting BJ. In fact, Giftmacher is controlling the fight, and he's described as moving the joysticks around and inputting combos and stuff. So this weirdly kind of turned into the best fighting game movie ever made. And so BJ is fighting this thing for a bit, and there's a bit which is kind of funny where Kessler gets too far away from the transmitter, and so he starts to shut down, and so Giftmacher is swearing, and he has to the transmitter into a makeshift backpack and start carrying it around with him. And so BJ's like, huh, okay, I figured it out. And so he starts chasing after Giftmacher, and so he runs away, and he's still controlling Kessler. Kessler's still chasing them. And so he basically leads BJ into a room full of 10 Nazi soldiers with the same thing having been done to them. And so BJ's like, oh shit, he runs away, and he finds a weapons room, and he comes out with a flamethrower and a machine gun. He just sprays fire all over the place, and he uses the machine gun to finish off whoever's left over. And Giftmacher is like, oh fuck, and starts to run, and BJ manages to wing him with the gun, but doesn't kill him. He can't chase after him because of the flames. And so BJ continues the other way, going through this door, and he finds himself in a bunker. And here we find Carmack. Turns out the Hitler clone he was fighting, he killed him, stole his clothes, and then gave himself a shoe-polished mustache. And he's been wandering all over the castle disguised as a Hitler clone, and no one was stopping him. And that is an absolutely brilliant yet stupid thing, and I love it. Okay, that's kind of cool. Carmack got by pure stealth. So, kinds of the original Castlevania. Oh god, not Castlevania. This is a much better script than this. The original Castle Wolfenstein game is kind of happening at the same time as the big shoot-'em-up version. And so he mentions overhearing that one was taken to the Rat King lab. And so they go there, and they retrieve him from the cylinder, and they flamethrow the Rat King, and they kill some scientists and stuff. And so they find another weapons locker. They resupply. BJ acquires a railgun. Now, I did not stop to look this up, I don't know what the World War II version of this would have looked like, but my mental image of a railgun is Fortune's gun from Metal Gear Solid 2. So, even though that's probably not what he's carrying around, that's the only thing I could picture in my head. And so they continue down into the bunker, and so they shoot up some technicians who run through a door and then seal it. And that's one of only, they can either go back the way they came, but BJ finds this trolley with some crates in it. It's like a minecart almost. He's like, okay, let's take this track, see where it leads. And so they're going down, and then the tunnel they're in starts to widen, and there's a machine gun nest that starts shooting at them, and they hide behind the crates. And they look into the shredded crates and they fire back and kill 2 of the guys. And they look into the crates and notice, oh shit, there's like some explosives here. Maybe we shouldn't hide behind these, which is kind of funny. And then the third guy that they didn't kill, he has a Panzerfaust, which is like a rocket launcher or a bazooka, whatever you want to call it. He's standing in front of the cart, he fires at them, and they duck. It goes right over their heads and misses them. And it hits right behind them some soldiers who were chasing after them, it turns out, who just got here. And they all blow up, the track blows up, and the guy goes, oh shit, and then gets run over by the cart and cut to pieces. It's like, okay, that's actually kind of funny. And so they keep going along on the trolley, and then right at the end of the line, dead set in front of them, there is another machine gun nest. And so they're like, oh crap, let's get out of here. They jump out of the trolley behind it, and then they let it just kind of roll right up to the machine gun nest as they shoot it, and then they shoot the explosives, and the explosives go off, and it destroys all of them. Now, that little section of the script, not only is it a fairly fun little action sequence, but it actually reminded me of another World War II game, and that is the original Medal of Honor. There's this whole sequence where you're making your way down a railroad track. You're not on a trolley, but you're making your way down the railroad track, and there's Nazis and bunkers shooting at you with machine guns. And it reminds me of that. And I'm pretty sure, if I'm remembering correctly, the last one you run into is dead set in front of you, like in this one. So maybe Avery played that as well. So that's pretty cool. And so they go further, and they find a chemical lab full of Nazi scientists, and the 3 of them shoot them down. And there's one left who's crouching and hiding behind the table, and BJ goes to finish him off. And then he sees that he's chained to the floor, so he's basically a prisoner. And then the guy looks up at him, he realizes it's his father. And then he says, he's like, oh crap, Dad, they told me that you were taken to a camp and gassed. He says, hey, they told me that they captured you and they were holding you, and that they basically used that to make him work on the science. And so BJ shoots off the chain. They're like, okay, we're gonna have to go find a way to escape. We gotta get to our extraction point. And then he says, oh no, there's something else we have to stop. They have this special weapon called the Letzte Hoffnung, or the Last Hope. I butchered that. And Death's Head is going to launch it. What it is it's a V3. It's an atomic bomb, basically, that they're launching. You have a V3 cannon. And he said, or it's like it's being shot out of a cannon, and it's described as a V3, even though V1 and V2 were rockets, but whatever. He says, oh, they're going to launch it at London, and it's supposed to be in the event of a full-scale invasion of Europe by the Allies. It's a last resort kind of thing. And so he says, do you know where this thing is? And so they go there, and they find the lab, and it's sealed up tight behind these metal blast doors, and BJ takes out this rocket launcher that he has and goes, hey, I got the lockpick, and he goes to shoot it open. And so Death's Head, he's prepping it for a launch, and they come in, and then Death's Head unleashes the Uber Soldat on them, which is, it's a massive cyborg. It's a robot body controlled by it's described as being a fetus too, but it's like this weird twisted Hitler head in a jar full of liquid. Basically, it's like a big acrylic dome, and it's wielding twin Gatling guns. So yes, Robo Hitler from Wolfenstein 3D makes an appearance in this. And so it's shooting, like, scientists are getting shot up, like, it's just killing indiscriminately. And so the characters, they're hiding behind like some cover. And it's like, okay, we're gonna have to fight. We have to distract this thing. We're also gonna have to get Dr. Blazkowicz up to the controls to stop the bomb. And so Agent 1 and BJ, they look at each other and they start playing rock, paper, scissors to see who has to do which job. And BJ loses, so he has to go distract Robo Hitler, and one is going to take Abel to the controls, and Carmack is going to provide cover fire. And so And so BJ is like drawing the Robo Hitler away. Carmack is trying to shoot it in its joints, but that's not working. And then Abel and Agent 1, they get up to the controls and they find out that it's already started. And he says that they can't do anything because the mechanism is so complex that they can't turn it off once it's been turned on. And so BJ's fighting Robo Hitler, and eventually he jumps on its back and he's riding it like a Bronco as it's described. And so he shatters the glass dome on top, and the head turns around and looks at him and gives him a creepy smile, and BJ just shoots it and kills it. And then the whole cyborg collapses, and it's a bit longer of a fight than the way I'm reading it out, but I'm not going to read out the entire fight scene in the script. It goes on a little bit longer, and it shoots a lot more stuff. But hey, fucking Robo Hitler is in the script. Now, this is different from Robo Hitler in Wolfenstein 3D. There, it's Hitler or a Hitler clone. It's like it's in a robot suit, and you destroy the robot suit, and then it's chasing you around with a gun. It's just Hitler chasing you around with a gun. But I like the idea of it being just like a crazy Hitler head in a jar, like out of Futurama, controlling a big robot. I think that's pretty cool. And then Death's Head sees that this thing has been killed, and he goes, "I'm going to hurt you for this, Blaskovitz," or whatever he says to him. So he turns and goes to shoot Abel in revenge, but then Carmack takes the bullet for him, and there's like a mention of like, oh, it went right in and right out. Now he's okay and can keep running. And I'm just wondering, did the people who wrote Rampage, did they read this? Because the same thing happens to The Rock in that movie with even less explanation. Like, he just gets shot, he's lying on the floor, and like 5 minutes later he's back. He's like, oh, okay, I'm good. Which, if you've seen that movie, that happens in that movie. BJ is pursuing up the stairs, which are going next to the V3 cannon, and eventually Death's Head gets as far as he can. He's right next to the barrel, and he shoots off his Luger at BJ, but the impact, the force, the kickback throws him off balance, and he falls down the oiled barrel, and he can't climb up. Oops. Which is pretty funny. And so the heroes, they reconvene, and they're like, well, we can't turn this thing off, but it's aimed at London. What are we going to do? And then Carmack's like, can't we re-aim it? And so they just aim it down into the castle. He's like, wait, forget I said that idea, because he's afraid of getting blown up. And so they aim it down, and it's pointing right at a portrait of Hitler that's hanging up in this room. Because basically it's this big room, and like the roof opens up like an observatory with the cannon poking out, and then they like turn the crank and they aim it down, and they destroy the controls. Well, it's not like a crank, it's like a control system. And so they destroy the controls so that it can't be re-aimed, and then they flee, heading for the cable car. And they're like, oh crap, we got like 5 minutes to get to or like 10 minutes or something like that to get to our extraction point. So it's like a real relentless bum kind of tension moment. And like they were going to head for the escape earlier, saying like, oh, we only have so much time, but they had to go stop the bomb. And so they leave, and then Giftmacher arrives on the scene, bringing some men with him. He's like, hey, you scientist guy, try and move this thing. He's like, but we can't do it. We can't stop it, and we can't re-aim it. And so he shoots it, and he goes, hey, you, try and figure this out. So he opens it up, and he's trying to rewire the thing. And while this is going on, Death's Head is like trying to climb out. He can kind of climb out of the barrel now because it's been aimed lower. And so he's crawling towards that picture of Hitler. And so the heroes, they're fighting their way to the cable car. They get it working, and BJ has to jump onto it as it descends, and they have to fight again at the station halfway there. And Carmack is the one who has to jump towards it again. Really fun stuff. Once again, reminiscent of the cable car stuff when they're escaping the castle and Where Eagles Dare. Like I said, it's a very good movie to be drawing inspiration from. And so they get towards the bottom, they kind of come down below the clouds, and then they're getting towards the bottom, and they see, oh no, the tanks are waiting for us, and Ilsa von Bülow is down there, and she's controlling the ground forces, and she orders the tanks to fire at them. As this is happening, the timer on the cannon up in the castle finally runs down, and Death's Head, he's at the end of the barrel, he's looking at the portrait of Hitler, and he realizes the end is near, and he hears the bomb basically click into place to go shoot. He goes like, Mein Führer, and then the castle blows up. The cables snap, and the cable car drops. Now, it's not too high up at this point, I don't think, so this is why they don't die. But then again, the script is so over the top, I can believe them not dying from that fall. And it starts sliding around on the frozen river, and they just barely get, by the way, when they're falling down, they just barely get missed by the tank round. And Ilsa's pissed at that, but she jumps to the tank at the last minute because the snapped cables, they come crashing into the Alpine wheelhouse, and they slice shit up, as they always do in movies. And so, they get out of the cable car, and they steal a truck on the shore of the river, and it's just in time because the tank is driving along the frozen river, and it shoots at the cable car and destroys it. And so they're driving like crazy, get to their extraction point. They get to a frozen lake, which has the plane waiting for them on it. And then the tank shows up, and it's almost too late for them because the plane, which was about to leave without them, the fuel in the lines is kind of freezing, but they do eventually get the thing working and they manage to take off. And as Ilsa's sitting there about to order the tank to fire, she kind of hesitates for a moment, kind of thinking of it. Get the idea, she's kind of thinking about BJ and their past together, and BJ realizes that must be what happened, so he kind of smiles as he looks back, and then the ice cracks open and the tank sinks down. So she kind of gets a weird kind of emotional death for a Nazi bad guy. Like, she is still very much a bad guy and still very much evil in her way. But it's a very kind of human evil. Like, she's not the inhuman kind of psychopath like Death's Head or any of the other guys. Like, she's got that sort of backstory and characterization to her, which I like. And so, plane flies off as it escapes. They all kind of light up cigars, and then as the film fades out, a Wolfenstein theme song starts playing, which it says is going to be set to the tune of It's a Long Way to Tipperary, and I am not going to sing this. But that's kind of cool, because you would hear that kind of thing in old war movies where you would have soldiers singing and all that. So yeah, Castle Wolfenstein, not a perfect script by a long shot, I wouldn't say. It's a lot of fun, though. It is kind of, a big, loud, crazy action movie, but it's really fun. Like, it's got so much fun, so much crazy shit going on in it. That fight scene that ends with, I can't believe it, a knife up the ass is so insane. I mean, that would be worth watching the movie alone. And the fact that you have super soldiers, remote control zombies, Robo-Hitler, an army of deformed and mentally challenged, retarded, as they say in the script, Hitler clones. I mean, it's so crazy. And honestly, you get a decent cast together, get a decent budget, direct it well enough, and this could be really cool. It's a shame this didn't happen. And my understanding is that after Avery got out of prison, the project was back on, and basically what happened was that nobody wanted to fund it. Like, he couldn't get the funding for a video game movie. Nobody was interested. And my hope is that maybe, since Rampage has actually done fairly well, I believe Tomb Raider did pretty decently as well, if those movies, since those movies did pretty well, maybe someone will go, Wolfenstein, yeah, we'll fund that. We'll take a chance on it. I hope so, at least. But yeah, Castle Wolfenstein, I don't have a whole lot more to say about it other than it is balls out badass. And if you fix some of those problems I have with it here and there, like the choppiness in the first act and the super soldiers never get brought up again and a few little things here and there, it could actually be a pretty damn fun little movie. And I hope we do get a Wolfenstein movie that's this good somewhere down the line. And I hope Avery can get another directing job, because I understand he's actually not that bad of a director. Not that bad, that's an understatement here. He's actually a pretty damn good director. So yeah, that was Castle Wolfenstein, and until next time, guys, which I swear will be the Alien 3 episode, you have my word that will come out in May. Bye.